Through love, we are forgiven and then healed. And what happens on fourth Sundays is Reverend Jerrold listens to myself and Reverend Paul, and then he takes his notes, and then he listens to God all week and ties it all up together and simplifies what our theme means. So without further ado, let us welcome our assistant pastor, Reverend Jerrold Smith.
Good morning. You know, this is a very special place. I always have to remind you. This is the only place that I can come to and be at New Hope Baptist Church, Founders Church of Religious Science, City of Angels, and the Moriah Institute at the same time. All of it comes together right here. This is a place where we believe that whatever the question, love is the answer. And y'all know Reverend Jerrold honors and respects all religions, all faiths, all races, all creeds, all everything. I love everybody. But sometimes our truth makes it appear is that somebody's trying to do something to you. When the reality is, ain't nobody trying to do nothing to you. Everything that happens to us, we do to ourselves. We come together as one unit. There's only one God, there's only one power, there's only one unit. So all of the confusion, all of the stuff that you see going on ain't about them, it's about you. Because somewhere within you, there's some confusion. There's something going on. There's a misunderstanding. But through love, we are forgiven and healed. This is the last Sunday in February, I believe, which means it's the last Sunday of Black History Month. And February is always a special month for me, not just because it's my birthday, but it's because we get to recognize the Afrocentric contribution to our society, to this country, and to this world. So every year around this time when we celebrate Black History Month, I look into this file that I've had for many, many years, and it's full of little notes and papers, and I labeled it my blackness file. I know the revolution will not be televised, right? And I thumb through this file, and I remind myself of where we are, where we need to go, and how we can get there. I refresh my memory about some of the great accomplishments that we have made and continue to make to this world. You know, all of us are in a similar age range in this room. And when you think back to the history and the things that we retain, if I were to ask people in this room who invented the automobile, most of us would probably think somebody like Henry Ford, although he didn't invent the automobile, he just invented the assembly line to make them quicker. But you Mercedes driving people might say Carl Benz, who was given credit for the internal combustion engine. But my question for you today is, when you see a car and you think of Carl Benz, what do you think of when you see a refrigerated truck or refrigerated train rolling past you? Many of us don't even know that Frederick Jones, a black man, created the air conditioning and refrigeration units for buses and train systems. He made it possible for your produce and your meat and everything that you receive comes to you fresh. His invention was honored in 1991 by the National Medal of Technology that was given to him by then President George Bush. He was the co-founder of a company that some of y'all might recognize the name called Thermo King. That company sold for $2.5 billion in 1997. Yeah, this is Black History Month. I'm going to get to the topic, but I'm going to give you a little Black history first. Is that okay? When I was in elementary school, I learned that the telephone was invented by Alexander Graham Bell. But what they didn't tell me was the telephone transmitter and system developed by Granville T. Woods. Without that, there would be no clear, loud sound over great distances. And I'm not sure our youth today are being informed about modern-day geniuses like Mark Dean, responsible for the IBM personal computer. Marie Britton Brown, who invented the home security system. I know y'all got Ring and all this stuff, all this modern stuff, but the first home security system was invented by a black woman named Marie Brown. Evelyn Boyd Granville, an Apollo space programmer. Annie Easley, a NASA computer scientist. If it wasn't for her, the Viking nor the Voyager would have ever got off the ground. And according to anthropologists, all history is Black history. They proclaim that we are the first of God's creations on this earth. But before you stick your chest out, I want to remind you of something. Everything good and everything bad in today's society begins with you. If you were the first and the only, that means all of it came from you, right? So you're wondering, how did this thing get so twisted and confusing to where when we celebrate Black History Month and we look back at all the ways we were mistreated and all the things that we had to endure, why is that part of our experience, you might ask? Well, I read a book called The ISIS Papers. Y'all know about that one? Frances Cress Welsing, psychiatrist. And she has a theory about why black folks are treated today and have been treated throughout history, modern history, I will say. And her theory is that on the continent, when it was just us, there was this little kind of mutation thing that went on, and we refer to it as being albino. And those people were pushed aside. Those people were kicked out of the tribe. Those people were exempt from all the things that everybody else got to do. And because it was so hot and because they were so ostracized, they continued to migrate to the north and eventually ended up in what we call Europe. And over thousands and thousands of years, those same people decided to go back and divide Africa up into pieces and take it over. So as James Brown would say, some of what we've experienced has been the big payback. Now, Welsing, she spoke about this thing that we deal with today called racism. And she said, racism is a system that will ensure white genetic survival and to prevent white genetic annihilation on Earth, a planet which is overwhelmingly people that are people of color. Her attitude was so controversial that she got fired from her alma mater, Howard University, for the things that she was proclaiming and teaching. But before I get into our message, I want to give you just one more little bit of black history. We did not just arrive in this country via the slave trade. I know you've heard that before. James Brown had another hit he called Living in America. I came here today to tell you this. Black people have been living in America since 11,000 BC. The Folsom site, designated by the Smithsonian Institute, is a major archaeological site about 8 miles west of Folsom, New Mexico. This site was uncovered in 1908 by a black man named George Majunkin. He was an ex-slave and a cowboy ranch foreman. The information culled from this site was the first a set of discoveries that would allow archaeologists to revise their estimations on the time and arrival of Native Americans on North American soil. Folsom tribe in Arizona. When I read that, it makes me think of my grandmother. My dad was born on a reservation in Arizona. And when I was 6 or 7 years old, he would take me to visit my grandmother in a senior center right here in Los Angeles. Now, you got to understand, my dad was born in 1906. So that means his mama was born in the late 1800s, right? He took me in to see my grandmother, and what I saw was this cold, just beautiful skin, but it was as black as the shirt this brother has on. Her hair was coal black, but it was straight and long, almost to the floor. Her eyes were like a bluish green tinge. This woman came off of a reservation. And I was amazed because as a little kid, I had never seen anything. I knew my dad had green eyes, but he was fair complected. So obviously his daddy was fair complected. But when I read the story, I thought about her. I thought about the black Indian, and I thought about, you know how all of the things in history, when they, make the books and everything, they change the way things look. So maybe the Indians that we saw on the Western movies, maybe they didn't look like that in reality. Definitely not in originality. So throughout human existence, there's been something in play. And the reason why the confusion and the reason why black history is so important is a long time ago, and I've told you guys this before, and I hope some of you may have heard it before, but bear with me. You see, there was this thing from the beginning of civilization that we refer to as the caste system. And that goes back to the beginning of time, goes back to when we were responsible for all of it. What was that black movie, that the black hero that everybody was so in love with a few years ago? No, not Birth of a Nation, the Black Panther. Yeah, that's the one. The caste system existed then. And it's simply that royal family, that 1%, the people at the top of the rung, they get to run everything. They tell everybody underneath them how to live. So the royal family, if you remember my story, they dictate to the military and to the church. And the military and the church tell you what to do and how to do it and when to do it. And then underneath the military and the church, you have the merchants and the farmers. And then underneath the farmers and the merchants, you have what? The servants and the slaves. Now, the Hindu, in their intellect, they gave those classes colors, not because of color of skin, but just their way of transferring the information. And down throughout history, it got flipped into skin color. So the royal family was white, of course. The military and the church, they labeled as red, and they labeled the farmers and merchants as yellow, and they labeled the slaves and the peasants as black. And over time, Just like the way the Indians looked got changed, just like the way Jesus looked got changed, all those things got changed. And they took scripture and they started interpreting it. You know, Constantine and his boys, they decided how they wanted y'all to think, and they changed it. And they made those colors, and that's what created this race situation that we have now, which is not from God. God, you know, he didn't create no race situation. We did, human beings, people in charge, that 1%. So racism really has nothing to do with color. It has everything to do with capitalism. It has everything to do with money, because the system they created was all about retaining that 1% at the top and keeping everybody else in their place. Make sense? So you see, this so-called situation that we're in, it started in America in the 1600s. In the 1600s, the people who came here from Europe, the landowners, that 1% I'm talking about, and took all the land, they were making a whole lot of money doing tobacco farming. But they needed workers. Some of you think that that's why they brought y'all here. But I got news for you. The first workers were European workers. The people out of jail and out of the mental institutions, the people who were downtrodden, who didn't have no way to take care of themselves there, they brought them here to farm the tobacco. In the 1600s, only 1/3 of the servants were black. They were Irish, British, whatever, wherever they came from. But something happened. Those workers who were working together in the fields, they were living together, they were intermarrying, they were, you know, doing whatever they needed to do to survive, hoping they could work their way into freedom, hope they would work their way into a situation where they could own something and have something of their own. But those European servants, they got upset at the way they were being treated by that 1%. So that's what they did. They started a revolution. They had a revolt. They call it Bacon's Revolt. Don't take Reverend Jerrold's word for it, look it up. And in that revolt, all the black folks and all those European folks, all the po folks was in there together, and they raising sand. So in order to control the situation, the founders of this country had an idea. Here's what we're going to do to put down this revolt. We're going to let the white people, the lighter-skinned people, we're going to give them their freedom. We're going to give them a wagon and a mule and a sack of feed and a pot of land, and maybe even let them have a gun. Because by then, they had recruited enough of y'all. That's what happened. So when they did that, now, you and I are working in the field together. You from England, and I'm from Africa. We boys. You know, we share everything. But all of a sudden, you get to have a farm, and you get to have a cow, and you get to have some money, and you get to have some freedom, and I don't. You love me, we tight, but you got to cut me loose. You ain't gonna turn that down. This is what happened, y'all. So this psychiatrist and attorney, her name was Jacqueline Baccaloria. She wrote a book that explains what I just told you. It's called The Birth of a White Nation and the Invention of White People and Its Relevance Today. You see, there was no such thing as a white person until this revolution, until the forefathers of this country said white people have certain privileges. Because we were always black. We was black before we were niggas. Y'all know that, right? We were blacks. So you see, that Bacon's Revolt, that's what began this institution of racism that we're now today using love in order to forgive, in order to heal this situation that we have. So, okay, Reverend Jerrold, you've done your Black History thing. Power to the people. Now, we know we've been tricked, as my brother Martin would say, Malcolm, I should say, would say. We've been tricked, we've been bamboozled into hating each other, into fearing each other, into distrusting each other, based on color, class, culture, and even church. So how do we unite as one people, celebrating and demonstrating the one power and the one presence that we call God? It's through love. Only through love will we be forgiven and healed. Our text tells us this. It says, love is the only perfect science of creation. Love is the full givingness of spirit. Love is free from condemnation and fear. Love is irresistible force of God. Love is the foundation for all that there is. Yes, this world has some major issues, but your relationships also have areas of concern. Our finances have periods of instability. Our health has seasons of imbalance. But whatever the question, love is the answer. Love can make the right wing and the left wing flap in unison. Y'all spend a whole lot of time dividing yourselves consciously. So focused on our differences, we overlook our commonalities. We all have the opportunity to resurrect our consciousness. Luke 1:37 says, nothing is impossible with God. Nothing's impossible. So I know sometimes what you hear on the news, what you see on TV, what you talk about with your friends gives you that hopeless feeling that, oh, this mess that we're in, we can never get out of it. Not true. Love can change it. Love can fix it. But you can't love somebody if you don't sit down and talk to them. If you ostracize them just because their opinion is different from yours, just because they may look different from you, just because they may vote different from you, just because they may live somewhere that you don't live, if you stay away from them and identify them by what the news media tells you, you can't fix it. The only way this stuff can be fixed, people, is if we do this. That's the only way. That's why God made it this way. I say this all the time, and some people get mad at me, but if you think about it, they told you that, black melanin people were first. We were the original. What if God allowed this evolution of people, this evolution of cultures, all these different shades, all these different attitudes, all these different thought processes to exist, to see how long it would take for them to come back together? He kind of put the program, he scientifically created the option because when we come together, what happens? It goes back to the one. Am I right? What if that was the plan from the beginning? I grew up extremely militant. When I was a teenager, the white man was my enemy. I'm sorry. I had the tam, I had the leather jacket, I had the green jacket, I had the boots. I had the shotgun with the stop sign, all of that. But what happened? To me, can happen to everybody. I evolved. I realized that was not my enemy. I realized that person put me in a position to earn a living and do some things that I would have never done if it wasn't for some of them. I had a career that I thought I was going to be a good baseball player and make a whole bunch of money. But I was so militant and so angry and had so much hate within me, I accused the coach of being a racist the first day of practice. Guess what happened? He set my butt on the bench, and I didn't move. Didn't see not 1 minute on the field. Whose fault was that? Mine. I should have kept my mouth closed and went out there and showed him what I could do, instead of calling him a racist for making me third string on the first day. Ernest Holmes says this. He says, any wrong condition we experience is made from the same substance that the most perfect form is created. We say it here all the time, there's only one power and one presence. What makes it good or bad is how we use it. So no matter the condition that we find ourselves in, we must affirm at all times, I am the Christ. I am the son or daughter of the living God within me. I am the spirit of confidence. I am poised in love and forgiveness. Reverend Lisa reminded us that God is always right where we are. She told you your inheritance awaits your living trust in God. If you have a problem, unite with the one mind of God and solve that problem. Nothing happens by chance. Everything happens by choice. We've got a lot of social issues, y'all, yet God has never been prejudiced. Not ever. Our issues are products of our fears. Reverend Paul urges us to fall in love with yourself. The circumstances exist not because of what happened, they exist because of how we respond to what happened. If fear and doubt, those are the things that makes room for the anger. Self-love and forgiveness removes all of us out of harm's way. When something catastrophic happens, instead of going, oh my God, look what happened, give thanks for the lesson. Because in that lesson, there's a mental awakening that will enhance your experience. The best detergent for mental cleansing ain't Tide, y'all. It's your contribution to life and your ability to demonstrate love. This Bible that I read and I share with you all the time is full of stories of how love and forgiveness heals. I didn't bring my Bible today because I knew I wasn't going to have time to read to you. But it's full of stories. David defeated Goliath because he had love on his side. Jesus resurrected humanity with forgiveness. The centurion experienced the healing through faith. But the most significant thing, the most significant story that acknowledges and highlights the divine essence and creation of love is one that I'm going to share with you in just a moment. Because this faith, what does the book say, Reverend Lisa? Faith is the substance of all things hoped for and the evidence of things unseen. Y'all read that one? I'm going to give you one that goes with that one. Love is the love is the creative foundation of all things and the divine power that maintains, multiplies, and motivates God's idea into expression. Love is the creative foundation of all things and the divine power that maintains, multiplies, and motivates God's idea into expression. The power and presence of unconditional love can purify any contamination. Love can overcome any and all hatred. Love can give life to a dead spiritual consciousness. Love forgives all who trespasses and others and also forgives themselves. Love transforms and perceives negative experience into a healing opportunity. I told you how much I like this month, and it's not just because it's my birthday. Valentine's Day happens in February. And I love Valentine's Day because it brings attention to the one and only source of all things, the unconditional love of God, whose purpose and desire is to do only two things: forgive and heal. Allowing you to forgive yourself and allowing you to heal yourself. Allowing you to heal yourself so you can forgive others. You know, Valentine's Day doesn't get the attention I believe it deserves. St. Augustine was commemorated on February 14th for his unconditional love and service to the persecuted Christians. You see, there was a time when being Christian was worse than being a black man in Jim Crow South. St. Valentine was the civil rights leader of his day. Now, I know for most of y'all it's a stretch to put Valentine's Day on the same level that we would put Christmas or Easter, but think about this. Without the union of love and wisdom, there would be no Christmas. Without the healing and resurrecting power of forgiveness, there would be no Easter. Valentine's Day takes a back seat because of the commercial things that we put on it. But in the spirit of Valentine's Day, the greatest example I can share with you of how love can change any person in every situation, that love and devotion that is expressed in Scripture in association with a woman that we call Mary Magdalene. Wherever she was mentioned, the power of love and devotion and service was revealed. Now, I'm not going to read the scripture to you because you already know the story. They say that this woman had 7 demons. Magdalene, what she represents to all of us is that effeminate, emotional side of us. You see, before we find the Lord, our desires are motivated by immediate gratification, void of spiritual understanding. We deny and ignore our eternal Christ presence. We allow our emotions to go unchecked and produce error thinking. But when the right man comes along, when you recognize the spiritual strength within you, those 7 demons of deceit, that demon of lawlessness, that demon of doubt, that demon of selfishness, that demon of fear, that demon of lust, that demon of immediate gratification gets cast away. You see, when you fall in love with the Christ presence within you, deceit becomes sincerity. Lawlessness evolves into justice. Doubt is replaced by fear. Selfishness transforms into full givingness. Fear gives way to confidence. Lust is subdued by agape love. Then that physical gratification morphs into spiritual understanding. Mary Magdalene was devoted to Christ. That means that she embodied a resurrected consciousness. Your every thought, your every word and action reflects the depth of love, feeling, and divine service when you devote yourself to Christ. Your purified seeds of thought find their way into the soul anchored in unconditional love. Mary Magdalene and Jesus were inseparable in consciousness. His homeboys allowed their ego to portray him. But all the women in his life, they followed him everywhere, to the cross, to the tomb, and welcomed and announced his eternal spiritual consciousness. Now, I've done a lot of weddings and a lot of marriage counseling in my life, but if that's not a picture of holy matrimony, I don't know what is. Now, you fellas, you have the same opportunity. We are just as capable of demonstrating a love that can conquer any problem we may face. I told you earlier, David used love to conquer the Goliath in his life. That same love will overcome your challenges that you encounter. David represents divine love in human consciousness. Those Israelites are thoughts and feelings turned towards spiritual truth. But Goliath, that giant Philistine, symbolizes a strongly enriched, erroneous belief in material, selfish desires. And like the political atmosphere of today, he possessed a negative, greedy, selfish, non-spiritual point of view. They say he had on armor. He wasn't on just bigger than everybody else. He had armor on. That armor represents all the military support, all the outer appearances and general acceptance, which helps us sustain the oppressive manifestations in this world. Somebody say something, what they call it, ice. That's the armor. Like David, we have to accept Goliath's challenge. Love for truth is inspiring us to do something to overcome the manifestation of this error thinking that we're being faced with. As Reverend Jesse would say, we got to keep hope alive. We got to step out on faith, knowing that we're outmanned, knowing that we can't match the guns and the physical strength. David was no match for Goliath physically. But our only armor is love for truth and faith in God's spiritual protection. Our sling is a shot of power and accuracy that affirms our every thought, delivering a message of love and truth to that carnal mind. That stone is the foundation in which we build the true Christ nature within ourselves. The Christ consciousness provides the wisdom to keep safe distance away from that error thinking. In the story, David didn't get too close. He said, I'm going to take care of you from over here. You stay over there. He stayed away because he didn't want to get connected to the sense and negative consciousness that was appearing to him. Any consciously spoken affirmation of truth has the projectile-like power to hit its mark. When he sling that rock, he hit the giant in the forehead. That stone penetrated that forehead. It's the law of the word being fulfilled. It's penetrating the error appearances with the power of affirmative truth. Goliath, that mighty giant, faced with the truth of love, faced with the Spirit of God, fell. He hit the ground. And then the story gets a little gruesome. It says that David used Goliath's own sword to chop off his head. All error manifestations lose their heads after an encounter with a consciousness and zealous of a true love of God and humanity. That error consciousness loses its head. So as we celebrate our storied history, as we pay tribute to unconditional love, as we affirm whatever the conflict, love can solve it. Whatever the persecution, love can overcome it. Whatever the injustice, love can forgive it. Whatever the disease, love can heal it. When we stand on our truth, as we do here at Los Angeles Third Church for Spiritual Living, whatever the question, love is the answer. And as we leave here today knowing, through love, we are forgiven and we are healed. God bless you. And so it is.
Thank you, Reverend Jerrold. Let's give him some more love.